Hey, sports card fans, it's John, Wade Boggs fan. In this episode of Card Collecting 101, I want to talk about how to become a player collector. Whether you are new to the hobby and are looking for a focus in your collection, or whether you are an experienced collector that is looking for a different direction to take their collection, there are 5 things to consider when deciding on becoming a player collector. The first 3 things to consider all tie in with one another. But the first one, obviously, is you need to decide which player you want to collect. Now, it may seem simple enough, and for some of you, you already know who you want to collect. Then there's others out there that know you want to start a player collection, but you're not quite sure yet who you want to collect. And that was sort of the case with me before I started my Wade Boggs collection. I had predominantly been collecting sets or trying to compile sets, and I knew I wanted to go in a different direction, and I wanted to start a player collection, but I didn't really know who right away. So I went through my collection, saw that I had a decent amount of cards of Wade Boggs. He was a longtime Red Sox, and I've told my story before, and that's how I decided on Wade Boggs. If you are undecided, take a look at your favorite team. Decide whether you want it to be a modern player or a veteran player or a Hall of Famer. One of the things that's key is that you have to have passion about that player, especially if that player, if it's a current player, you need to think about what if that player gets traded or signs as a free agency with another team. Is this a player that you are going to follow throughout different teams, or is it only because he's a current player of your favorite team? So different things to consider. I had another video on being a player collector and what happens if your PC, your player collector, changes teams, things like that. So you actually do need to put some thought into who you want to collect. The second thing to consider is factoring in your budget. I'm sure most of us, within reason, have a monthly card budget that we have to play with for our collection. Now, for someone just starting off and just wanting to focus on a player collection, you may be able to put your entire card budget into that player. If you've been a long-time collector and have been going one direction and want to either go in a different direction, expand your collection, you may need to consider how much of your budget you want to devote to this new player collection, as well as having funds for other cards that you may enjoy buying. Again, personal experience here, for the longest time, I pretty much only bought Wade Boggs cards. That was it, other than memorabilia. It was all Wade Boggs. With a few exceptions of a vintage card, if I would see here or there, but again, nothing even focused, okay, on that area at that time. So most of my budget, again, was going toward Wade Boggs, and that was it. As I started expanding my collection, and as of about a year ago, I decided to venture away from player collection, actually, and do some vintage cards, buy some vintage cards of Hall of Famers. And so I had to decide out of my budget how much I wanted to continue to devote to Wade Boggs, how much I wanted to devote to the vintage cards. So right now, again, nothing set in stone, but it's turning out right now to probably be at least 50-50. And there's sometimes I find myself buying a little bit more vintage than some Wade Boggs cards. That's also because I don't see any cards that I'm missing as often because I've built up my Wade Boggs collection. But again, if you're starting off and that's all you want to do is collect a certain player, you can devote your primary budget to that player. If you have multiple interests and you wanted to add a player collection, you need to decide how much of your budget you want to devote to that player collection. The third thing to consider is creating a checklist. Checklists are good for a variety of reasons. First, it'll tell you what cards you have. Second, it'll tell you which cards you do not have. And third, it may actually help you decide which player you may want to focus on if you are undecided. I had done a previous video on how to become a super collector, and I had talked about how many cards have been made, say, of Mike Trout versus other players, Wade Boggs, and I focused on a couple other players. In the case of Mike Trout, he has over, I think, 15,000 different cards made of him. Now, that could be good in a sense or bad in a sense if you're thinking of becoming a Mike Trout player collector. Good in a sense that there are many cards out there for you to pick up. Even if you don't want to reach a super collector status, there's plenty of Mike Trout cards out there. You shouldn't have trouble finding them. A lot of base parallels. You could probably build up a nice collection and not even have to worry about picking up autograph cards or low serial number cards. And you could, again, be very happy with your player collection of Mike Trout and have a lot of cards in that collection. On the other hand, with 15,000 cards out there of Mike Trout, if you want to build a really, really good collection, if you're serious and again, maybe want to hit that super collector status, Mike Trout cards, especially autographs, jerseys, patches, low serial numbered cards, they're probably going to be expensive. And so that goes to the budget that you have. That goes to whether, how serious of a player collector you want to be. If you're just interested in Mike Trout, you like Mike Trout, and you want to collect some Mike Trout cards, but aren't really worried about getting up in that, like I said, super collector status or whatever you want to call it, but you just want to collect Mike Trout cards, then that's fine. 15,000 plus cards out there, you have plenty to choose from that may not break your budget that you have set aside for your player collection. If you're putting a checklist together and on a player and see that they only have a couple hundred cards, in one sense, you say, okay, I don't have to go after that many. There aren't that many out there, and I can go after them. Okay. On the flip side, a player that has so few cards, if they're modern cards, there may be a lot of one-of-ones or autograph cards. They may actually be hard to find. So you may actually struggle to even maybe find 50 cards of a particular player, depending on how many are out there. Even veteran players, Hall of Fame players, if the further you go back, there's fewer playing day cards of those players. And again, as you get back into vintage, now it goes into the raw, graded, what grade you want, what your budget is, all that stuff. So that could play into which player you decide to collect. Now, in terms of the checklist itself, when I first started off with Wade Boggs, I wanted, again, to put a checklist together. I started with Beckett. Now, I know there's thoughts out there that in terms of Beckett price guides and other things, they may not be as good as real-time eBay values or whatever. But one thing I think they've always done well is checklisting the cards out there. So when I first went about putting a checklist together for Wade Boggs, I started with Beckett. So I started with Beckett's checklist, put a spreadsheet together from that. Now, of course, they didn't have every card out there of Wade Boggs. So there were other places I went to. One website that I like to go to for new releases is the Cardboard Connection. Whenever there's a new release, they always have the checklist. Either they place the checklist on their website. I believe Beckett does it as well. but I like the cardboard connection. Um, and sometimes if it's a Panini release, they may have Panini's spreadsheet that I can easily cut and paste, put that those Boggs cards from that spreadsheet into my spreadsheet. But I am constantly, whenever I see a new card release, I'm checking out whether Boggs is in that set or not. And if it is, I'm cataloging all the new cards. So I'm constantly updating my checklist. And to this day, I am finding even older cards that pop up on eBay that I never had in my checklist. So it's very important that if you're going to have, for most player collectors, generally speaking, I would think that your goal would be to get as many different cards. Okay. You may not have a particular number in mind, and you may not mind having duplicates of a certain card. But I think for the most part, if you're a player collector, you want to add new and different cards to your collection. So for me, it's always been important to update and expand my checklist as new Wade Boggs cards are released. So other places then, and it's not just Beckett, it's not just Cardboard Connection. There are other places. Sports Card Checklists, I think, is a good website. Trading Card Database, even ComC, even though they may have issues with shipping and all that stuff, just doing a search of that player to see what cards are for sale, and of course eBay. Just do a search, and you can thumb through the listings, and you may find some parallel that you weren't aware of, or some oddball card, or an error card, or a variation that you may not have in your checklist. So when I go through my eBay listings on a daily basis, if there's a new card release or a new card of Boggs that I know I don't have on my checklist or suspect I don't have on my checklist, I'll save that listing, even if I have no intention of going after that card, just so I have a reminder to go back to my checklist and to add to my checklist. So I'm constantly working on my checklist, marking off the cards that I have, adding new cards that are new for Boggs, probably on a weekly basis. So checklists are a very important aspect to a player collection. The fourth aspect to consider is just how to get started. Now, you can go out and buy a card here, buy a card there, but depending on the number of cards out there. So let's again bring Mike Trout up again. Roughly 15,000 cards out there. One way to jumpstart your player collection is to go on eBay or other sites and buy a player lot. There may be some duplicates, they may offer, hey, so many different, here's 100 different Mike Trout cards, or 50 different, or whatever. That may be a good way. If you're just starting off, you don't know which cards you want or whatever, you just want to get some Mike Trout cards, maybe look into buying some player lots of that player. Now, again, if depending on how many total cards a certain player has, there may be less likelihood that they would be offering player lots, or if they are, they may only be of 2, 3, 5, 6 cards, 9 cards maybe. I've seen some where they just have a sheet of 9 different players that they'll put on eBay. Now, one of the things I did with my Boggs collection is probably around 2005, I think it was. And I forget how I came across this listing. I don't know if it was on eBay or through Facebook or some connection that a collector had. I want to say I bought a 5,000 count box. Now, they weren't all different, of course, but I think I ended up with probably at least 800, if not more, different cards. Now, that purchase cost me a bit. It was probably in excess of like $600, but for 800 different cards and duplicates, turns out some of those 800 different were some pretty hard to find parallels and other cards that I don't know if I would have had today, or at least would have struggled to find individually on eBay. So that player lot purchase really jump-started my Wade Boggs collection, because at the time I may have only had 5, 6, 700 different. So that one purchase there nearly doubled the number of different Wade Boggs cards I had. and really set me on my way to truly focusing on getting as many different Wade Boggs cards as I could. So consider buying player lots, especially early on in your player collection. The fifth and final aspect to consider is networking with other similar player collectors. Now, you may be pessimistic at first and think, well, I don't want to reach out to other similar player collectors because they may be competitors on eBay or whatever. But I think you'll find in this hobby that there's more camaraderie, more willingness to help each other out, especially if you find someone who has the same interest as you in a particular player. I know for me, with Wade Boggs, there are a group of 5, 6, 7 of us that actively collect Wade Boggs. Now, do we occasionally clash heads and both go after, or 3 of us go after a similar card? Yeah, it happens. But all of us understand and appreciate the fact that that card is going to remain within our close group. All right, we have a very tight-knit group. Like I said, about 5, 6 of us that just encourage each other, watch out for each other. If we see a card that one of us knows that they're looking for, we'll let them know, hey, I just saw this pop up on eBay, guys. I have one, go after it, hope you get it, things like that. I know that's the case with some Barry Bonds collectors out there on Facebook. They have their own Facebook group of Barry Bonds collectors, and they're doing trades, and they're looking out for each other, selling cards to each other, maybe a duplicate. Hey, I have 2 of these. You need that? All right, you have 2 of those. I need that one, and trading. So definitely take advantage of the networking opportunities through Facebook, through YouTube, through other social media, of getting in touch with other similar player collectors, and that can be a way to help grow your player collection. So there you have it. 5 things to consider when you're deciding upon being a player collector. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've missed some of the last Card Collecting 101 videos, you can find them right here. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, would love for you to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell to be notified of when I post my next video, and you can do that right there. That's all I have for you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.